quite a bit to talk about. A lot in the news in the last few weeks. The and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. What is all the fuss about? J&J just a few months ago, and back in February, was sued by one of its employees for exorbitant, what they believe to be exorbitant drug costs that J&J permitted. Not a month later, the Mayo Clinic was sued for a very similar reason. The first lawsuits of those kinds on record. Uh, and I just read just yesterday that J&J asked the court to dismiss the lawsuit, and you never know how these things are going to play out. You just don't. So I'm not saying it's going to play out one way or the other. What I do know to be fact is that these companies, many of them, have permitted pharmacy benefit managers to get away with self-dealing, where it inevitably led to both the employer and their employees paying too much, because many of these PBMs, their goal was never to lower cost. Their goal was simply to show you the optics to make the buyer believe they were lowering costs, when in fact they were increasing costs when you compare it relative to a PBM that really is transparent and pass through. I know that to be a fact. J&J asked the courts to dismiss the lawsuit, in part because they have every incentive to make sure that they don't overpay. Well, incentive and results are two different things. And so that's what we're going to be getting into here today. So just a little bit about me, and you've probably already done your homework, or otherwise you wouldn't be here. But just a little bit about me. I've been in the industry now for 2 decades. I started out with Eli Lilly. I was a drug sales rep, spent a little bit of time in the corporate offices where I led an access team that was charged with getting our branded products onto the PBM's formulary. In other words, negotiating, paying the PBM's rebates. Left Eli Lilly, started a mail order pharmacy. So that left Eli Lilly around 2005 or so. Hatched plans to, I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur, started a mail order pharmacy, licensed in all 50 states, cashed out right around 2009, at the end of 2009, going into 2010, when biologics, it was clear it was going to be the future. We knew it was going to be big in terms of revenue to drug manufacturers, but I don't know if anyone really thought that this fast biologic drug, specialty drug spend would outpace traditional drug spend. Became frustrated when owning the mail order pharmacy with the low reimbursements, which we're going to talk about here today, coming back from pharmacy benefit managers, and then the poor or high cost of goods from the drug wholesalers. They get you into these master contracts, and require you to buy a certain percent of the drugs, from them, and then they jack up the prices, so you're getting squeezed. So I just decided, hey, if you can't beat them, join them. But we were going to do it different. We started the first fiduciary model PBM in the country back in 2014. And I only share this with you because I don't want to hide anything. The industry already has a bad enough rap. I'm certainly not, and my team are certainly not going to add to that. So by the end of this presentation, and you might want to buckle up for this, by the end of this presentation, I want you to know exactly how PBMs make money, or have a better understanding of how PBMs make money. I want you to feel something other than indifference, because without emotion, no action is going to be taken. And what I want buyers and consultants and their advisors to do is to start holding PBMs, their feet to the fire. That starts with contract nomenclature. We're going to get into that here today. All right, so most buyers or consultants, when they approach a competitive bidding process, uh, they start with pricing. They start with pricing, a claims repricing. My advice is to start with the contract, because these PBMs that are non-fiduciary rely on what we call information failure or information asymmetry, which simply means when one party has access to information that another party doesn't have access to, the party with the information leverages it to its financial advantage. You ever heard of situations where a plan sponsor of a PBM it has say a carved in or carved out PBM, they're self-insured, but they can't get their own claims data from the PBM? The PBM knows when you have the information, you make better decisions. And so they want to make it tough to withhold that information from their clients, because it makes it tough to determine what they're being paid to be the PBM. Can you believe this? I've never been in an industry with as many smart, shrewd, detail-oriented business people, yet sign contracts when they have no clue how much they're paying the PBM to PBM. The PBMs thrive on that. That's what they want to have happen. The optics are AWP discounts, NADAC plus, minimum rebate guarantees, no matter how you slice it. Eligible per brand claim, per claim brand engine, no matter how you slice it. So if you believe that to be true, then step number one is to eliminate information failure. This is a perfect example of what I was just alluding to. This is a health plan. This is a health plan with over 30,000 employees of its own. They were unable to get their own claims data. And by the way, in this situation, and not every, right? I don't want you to go out and say, Tyrone said every brokerage firm operates this way, or the brokerage firm operates this way with every single client. No, every contract stands on its own. But what I will say is that this health plan's advisor knew full well what the situation was. They're in on it. They're in on it. This is an example of what information success looks like, or symmetric information. When the PBM receives a receipt, an explanation of payments, a remittance advice from its rebate aggregator or directly from the drug manufacturer, which details every claim in which the drug manufacturer paid a rebate. Not one single line item. Every claim that received a rebate, and more importantly, what was earned for those claims that earned a rebate. It is powerful information. And listen, I can sit here and tell you, we've been doing this since day one. It does not make life easier for PBMs to share this amount of information, because now you have lots more questions from quarter to quarter. You have lots more questions, but dang it, that's the way it should be. That's the way. Am I your fiduciary or not? Am I working in your best interest or not? And if I am, we need to have access to the same level of information. So if you're married, or you're in a serious relationship, or you have a significant other and you live together, go out all night. No text messages, no phone calls, and show up at the house at 6 a.m. in the morning and say, I don't want to give you any information. How is that going to work out? How is that going to work out? It's unacceptable in our personal relationships, but we accept it in our business relationships. Stop it. This information, every self-funded entity should have. And here's part of the reason why PBMs are reluctant to share this level of data. Look at all the different ways now. When I talked about PBMs intentionally make it difficult to ascertain their fees, look at all these different ways that they're generating revenue now. I don't have the admin fee on here. You know why? Because it's fully you can audit it. It's per member per month, it's per employee per month, or it's per paid claim. And it's easy to account for that. Not so much when we're talking about spread pricing and we're talking about manufacturer revenue. And so that takes me back to the contract and why it's so important. Two things have got to happen here. One of two things have got to happen here. The PBM agrees contractually not to benefit financially from any of these revenue sources. They can't just say we're pass through or we're transparent or we don't play these games, because not even counting the big three, or we could even go as far as the big 5 or 6 now, not even counting them, even some of the more boutique, smaller regional PBMs, it's hard for them not to stick their hands in the cookie jar. It's hard, it's difficult. So they too, when the opportunity presents itself, will engage in profiting from these hidden cash flow streams. So one or two things have got to happen. The PBM agrees not to make money through any of these revenue streams and is only going to generate its fee from an admin fee or a management fee or a service fee. Fee only. Or if the plan sponsor decides to allow the PBM to generate revenue from these sources, they've got to know what it amounts to. You've got to know what they're keeping. Those are the only two options that prevent an employee for saying, or a lawyer, a law firm reaching out, asking your employees questions. So I'm not bashing PBMs. And I know there are some organizations and individuals out there that say the PBMs have no place in the market. There could be nothing further from the truth. The entities, and we've got to be better at how we align with our clients' interests, no doubt about that. But I can tell you, being on the pharmacy side, being on the manufacturer side, these entities and these individuals are trying to move up the ladder for a larger share of the healthcare dollar. That's what that's all about. But there are too many programs that we offer from a pharmacy benefit perspective, and even now moving medical benefit drug claims to the pharmacy benefit, and all the tools that we have to manage utilization and the networks and things like that. My issue are the hidden cash flows to non-fiduciary PBMs. We've got to bring those to the light. Now, you got to understand uh, the PBM business model before we go any further. And this is let me just dive into this. So, as a pharmacy benefit manager, we contract with pharmacies in order to have sites or facilities that can dispense prescription drugs to our plan participants. Those networks, or if it's not a network, the PBM can own a specialty pharmacy. It can also own a mail order pharmacy. We don't have time to get into the pros and cons of that from a PBM perspective today, but those networks aren't that difficult to establish, particularly when you got pharmacy services administrative organizations that a PBM could contract with, and maybe now you've got 10,000, 15,000 pharmacies in your network. And then when you contract with the chains individually, you can build a 65,000 pharmacy retail network without a whole bunch of resources being utilized. It's not that difficult. And so as a pharmacy benefit manager, we have to have clients to provide these services to that I've touched on. They are third-party payers and health plans, self-funded employers, unions, cities, states, school districts. And so when a pharmacy is in our network and it dispenses a prescription to a plan participant, I'm touching on the financial flow, we reimburse the pharmacy for that dispensed prescription. But the shenanigans have began long before that prescription even gets dispensed, i.e., DIR fees, direct indirect remuneration, where the PBMs come back sometimes months later, sometimes years later, and they claw back a percentage of the ingredient costs from the pharmacy. And they'll say it's fees for managing the network, or things like that. But truly what it is a hidden cash flow. Truly what it is a hidden cash flow. And a third party payer might say, well, you know, what does it matter to me? What does it matter? It matters because you're footing the bill. Come on. You know, it's like, if we have a weekly lunch for our team, and we go into petty cash, and maybe we spend a few $100 or whatever, and then there's $50 change, and whoever went to go pick up the lunch for the team keeps the change. And so when we reimburse a pharmacy for that dispensed prescription, then we bill our client for that dispensed prescription. Now, there's three problems here, three big ones. First, the inflow of cash back to the pharmacy benefit manager from the drug manufacturer. Also in here, you've got what could possibly be a rebate aggregator in between the manufacturer and the PBM. We'll touch on that here in a second. The inflow of cash back from the manufacturer to the pharmacy benefit manager, which is supposed to pass on every single penny of those dollars, or if they're not passing on every single penny, the third party payer in the health plan know what the PBM is keeping as their management fee. You can't have an efficient pharmacy benefit program if the plan isn't running based upon one of those two options. It is inefficient otherwise. There may be some good things happening, but it's not enough to make up for not knowing what the PBM is being paid to PBM. So the inflow of cash is too low because on the screen we showed all the different revenue streams that PBMs, eh, when it's their business model, will leverage to their financial benefit and to their clients' loss. So a portion of those dollars are being withheld from the client. The second problem is the reimbursement to the PBM is oftentimes too high. Or just like rebates, maybe it's where it should be. I wouldn't count on it, it, it if the PBM is generating revenue from it. But again, like rebates, you either agree the PBM doesn't make money using spreads, and we'll talk about that here in a second, or it's permitted to contractually, but the PBM client knows exactly what they're keeping. The PBMs don't want your clients to know what they're keeping, because if you don't know what they're keeping, they can keep more. And so, two problems. There's one more. The inflow of cash, manufacturer revenue, formulary rebates is too low, right? It's too low. That's the first one. The second one, the PBM client, the third party payer, the health plans are paying too much for the prescription drugs. J&J, Mayo Clinic. By the way, there are claims for which J&J paid the PBM generic claims over $10,000 for a drug that could have been dispensed at Joe's Corner Pharmacy for less than $100. The third problem, and this is a great segue, is look who sits at the very top of this entire system. You do. Your members do. Your clients do, which means you pay for the entire system, yet you know the least about how it functions. And organizations are taking advantage of it. They're not sticking their hand out to help and show you what you're doing wrong. They want to keep your heads buried in the sand. I don't. We talked about spread pricing. The drug pricing standards, which form the basis for discounted prices, is known as AWP, or ain't what's paid. And by the way, again, there's entities out there with their own self-interest, knocking AWP. AWP is bad. No, it isn't. It is the manipulation of AWP that is bad. No matter what the price benchmark is, if we're using the same source, you can back it in to get a discount off of AWP. If you know what the AWP is, we're using the same source, the same reporting source for that price. And no matter what the benchmark is, you can back it in to see how each entity performed against that AWP list price. And by the way, price is just one of the cost drivers. I'm going to argue strongly that there's parity in pricing among PBMs. That's very different than cost. Because if you have an efficient clinical program where you're leveraging mandatory generic enforcement, the PAs aren't rubber stamped, you're following clinical guidelines. You've got step therapy, dose optimization, formulary exclusions. You have these without reducing access to the drugs that people need to get better. A PBM could have better pricing, but have a poorly run clinical program compared to a PBM that has expertise written all over it in its clinical programs, where its pricing isn't as good, talking about network and spreads, but its overall cost to the client is superior. Yes, that happens a lot. So, uh, so just a couple things about AWP. The main thing is it's a list price. No entity actually pays the AWP list price. It's artificially inflated. Okay. The second type of price that we're going to talk about, let's call it a benchmark, and we're focused on generic drugs because that's typically where, uh, in terms of spread pricing, where PBMs are going to do it the most in terms of volume. So you got two price benchmarks, AWP and you got MAC. MAC reflects the actual transactional cost of the drug. It's not a list price like the sticker price on an automobile. AWP is. That's why you have to negotiate a discount off of it. Not true with MAC. So let's just look here really quickly. So we talked about two primary price benchmarks. They're the two primary ones. That mean they're the only ones. I could list off probably 10, which makes the industry even more confusing to someone where pharmacy isn't their day job. AWP is the first price benchmark, and we got MAC as the second price benchmark. Now, let me just show you here really quickly how spreads are actually working. PBMs know what the AWP is, they know what the WAC is, and they know what the ingredient costs are. That's the part historically PBM clients didn't know because they didn't actually go out looking for it, because they weren't concerned with the PBM's management fee, what they're paying the PBM to PBM. So let's take a look here at levothyroxine here. Look at this AWP, 561.85. Let's just keep it simple and call this 560. And a generic effective rate of 85% means no matter what price benchmark was being used to adjudicate the generic claim, AWP minus, MAC, UNC, right? No matter what the price benchmark was being used, across the board, on average, for all generic claims, the effective discount is 85% off the AWP. Now, there's lots of ways PBMs can play games with that. What I'm telling you is, with all that taken into consideration, 85% off of AWP from a single reporting service like a Medispec. And most plan sponsor consultants, they would say that's pretty good. Not too bad. Now, you should know many of you are probably getting an 85% a discount, but you wouldn't imagine how watered down it is, how inflated it is. Lots of ways to do that. Not the webinar class for that today, but just something to think about and dig into. But anyway, 560 is the AWP, and the PBM effectively is generating an 85% discount off of AWP for all generic drugs, which would mean that the discount is $475, or right around there. So that would mean that there's $85 left over. Now, here's the other part. Look at what this drug costs for a month supply. $4. The PBM could reimburse the pharmacy the ingredient cost, what they paid to put the product on the shelf, give them 100% markup, and pay a $2 dispensing fee. The latter two rarely happen. I got out of the pharmacy business because much of the reimbursements that we received were underwater. We were reimbursed less than what we paid. Pharmacy should be making, depending on where the pharmacy is located, in rural Iowa, $11, they can make a living. In California, not so much. Right? So the PBM's out-of-pocket cost is now at $10. That leaves $75 for a spread. The management fee. This is why PBMs say, oh, we're not going to charge you an administrative fee. It's free. Or here's a better one. We're going to give you a credit on your medical administrative fee. We're going to give you a credit on that. Just, in exchange, we're basically going to take at least half of your rebates. if not more than that. And those contracts are getting worse, not better, for those PBMs who depend on bad revenue, revenue that is bad to their clients, cost to the clients, but revenue to them. That's bad revenue. So you might be saying, Tyrone, well, okay, that's AWP. How often are generic drugs, uh, uh, the price going to be based upon the list price, the AWP? Aren't they going to be more times than not MAC? You would be absolutely right. But it doesn't take a whole lot of the generic drugs to be priced. That's why you have the DAW games to get to this AWP price benchmark, which determines the drug cost. So, but even still, let's say on the PBM's proprietary MAC list, the drug is $15. The PBM's out of pocket does not change. It's still $10, $5 spread. That's how uh, or why the state of Ohio terminated its contracts with these two PBMs. Costs continue to go up, even with better guarantees, pricing, and rebates. Why is this happening? They decided that they were going to pivot. The optics weren't working anymore. We want to know what we're paying you. In 1 year, these two PBMs here, just in spread pricing, in 1 year, and I just showed you what spreads were, generated almost $250 million just in spreads. This is okay if the state of Ohio, with unlimited resources, very smart people, knew about it and signed off on it. They had no clue until they decided, we want to know what your management fee is. If an entity like the state of Ohio starts digging and they want to know that, these PBMs are going to divulge that information. So when Greg Moody says here today that we're not saying this is too high or too low, what we're saying is this is information we've never had before. It almost sounds like he's pointing the finger at the PBMs. The problem is it's information they never demanded before. I'm asking you to start demanding it. Just a couple quick pointers that I want to share with you. MAC list rebates. PBMs I can just tell you, we have one. What do you need 40 MAC lists for? You know why. So the contract language reads the person believes there's only one MAC list. There are multiple MAC lists. The employer's MAC list will be less comprehensive and less aggressive than the pharmacy MAC list, meaning the prices aren't as low. The prices aren't as low. Sorry about that. The prices aren't as low, and there aren't as many drugs on that MAC list compared to the pharmacy MAC list. Remember, from the PBM's client, they want to bring in as much as they can, and they want to pay out as little as possible to the pharmacies. That generates the spread. In the PBM business model, U.S. pharmacy reimbursement distribution system slide, we only had one type of rebate on that screen, the formulary rebate, because for many plan sponsors, that's all they ultimately end up with in their bank accounts. Despite the optics, that's ultimately all you may end up with, and you may not end up with all of the formulary rebates. These are just three names or how rebates have been renamed contractually in an attempt for the PBM not to be required to pass those dollars on when they come into their bank account. This administrative fee is a manufacturer administrative fee. It's not the same administrative fee a PBM might charge for customer service, electronic claims adjudication, having an account manager. Completely different, and can be misleading. We talked about rebate aggregators. I touched on it earlier. I'm going to touch on this really quickly. Our PBM contracts with the rebate aggregator, which acts as a group purchasing organization. In other words, it has other clients like ours, or health systems, or very large employers who decided they want to carve out rebate management from their PBM. The rebate aggregator, because you just can't knock on a manufacturer's door and say, hey, um, you know, we spend 100 million on pharmacy benefits every year. Uh, the branded manufacturer is going to say, call me back when you get to 1 billion. Say, call me back when you get to 1 billion. Then we might be able to talk. And so, uh, uh, and so we've got this rebate aggregator, and they take all the claims from all of their clients. They've negotiated contracts with the PBMs, and then what they do is send these claims to the manufacturer. I think I said PBM before. They send all these claims to the manufacturer. The manufacturer will reconcile them against their contract, and then based upon the contract with the rebate aggregator, that's what matters, not the contract with me or Transparent RX, the contract with the rebate aggregator. And then based upon my contract with the rebate aggregator, and by the way, PBMs, like plan sponsors, like benefits consultants, uh, aren't created equally. In terms of industry knowledge, contract nomenclature, the ability to negotiate. And so I say that to say my PBM doesn't have the same contract with our rebate aggregator as maybe a health system. And the size doesn't matter. What matters is the knowledge. And so the rebate aggregator receives those dollars and then will pass those dollars on to each of its clients based upon the contract it has uh, with its clients. I can tell you there are very large PBMs, very large health plans that don't even receive a rebate remittance report. All they receive is a bucket of dollars, and that's it. It's not enough. It's not enough. And so when you look at a definition like this for rebates, it might lead you to believe that this is reasonable. Will pay customer 100% of the rebates that administrator receives in connection with the prescription drug product dispensed to participants, until you realize that a company like Optum may own a company called Coalition for Advanced Pharmacy Services. Even though Optum owns this company, it contracted with Express Scripts for rebates. So based upon this definition that you see here, when Coalition for Advanced Pharmacy Services receives the rebates, by definition, Optum, who Broward County contracted with, wasn't obligated to pass those dollars on. This is chess, not checkers. And this is public information, by the way, and I've got a link down there, and you could probably find it online if you decided to. And so the point I'm driving home with rebates is this: PBMs, we negotiate directly with pharmaceutical manufacturers, or rebate aggregators negotiate directly with pharmaceutical manufacturers. That those negotiations start off with the pharmaceutical manufacturer agreeing to pay dollars and place those dollars in these buckets that you see in that red box. And then what happens is the PBM, based upon its contract with the plan sponsor, may ultimately be able to keep these here and only pass back the formulary rebates. This was a lawsuit that was aired about 5 or 6 years ago, even though the transaction took place several years prior. But the point I want to make is Express Scripts, the PBM, sued this specialty drug manufacturer because Kalea refused to pay rebates that it didn't believe that it owed. I believe it did, but that's another story. And it probably didn't believe Express Scripts was bold enough to sue to make the information public. So even after the complaint was public, even with the redactions, you're still able to surmise that this is exactly what happened. The formulary rebate being paid from Kaleo to Express Scripts was only $1,600, but the administrative fee, the manufacturer administrative fee, you know the difference now, was $25K. In other words, it is possible that this plan sponsor got $1,600 and the PBM kept $25K. Well, you might be saying, Tyrone, that's old information. I'm a history buff of pharmaceuticals, and pharmacy benefits. But you might say, hey, Tyrone, that probably doesn't apply today. It's old. It's old news, is it? The state of Texas requires now every PBM with even a single member inside the state of Texas to report all the revenue it takes in from the drug manufacturers. In 2021, the PBMs retained 13%, but that's all, including large employers. I would argue that a small oil company in Texas, right, with maybe 500 employees, the PBM didn't retain 13%. It might have retained 39%. Here's what I'm getting at. I'm wrapping up. And I thought I had gone past 45 minutes. I'm doing good today. I got a couple more minutes hanging there with me. I'm going to tie this all up. The take rate. What is the percent of your cost, of your client's cost? What percent of that cost is attributed to the PBM's management fee? To the amount the PBM takes home because it's the PBM. What percent is that number? It's a metric not being evaluated, and it should be evaluated. I'm going to give you an example here in a second, but here's it's for lack of a better word, here's the genius of some of these PBMs that rely on bad revenue streams to maintain their profit margins, to maintain their top line growth. Here's the genius of it, is that it's hidden in the final cost to the plan. If there's a spread, it's going to take place here. If there's a rebate spread, so if there's a network spread, it's going to take place here, and you're not going to know what was the PBM's take home, what it contributed to that inflated ingredient cost. If there's a rebate spread, in other words, the PBM retained the portion that was paid to it by the drug manufacturer for itself, meaning that the rebates designed to lower costs to get to lowest net costs weren't all passed on, which thus means cost goes up. Everything in green is revenue that hits the PBM's bank accounts. And these PBMs hire the biggest consultant firms to help them identify opportunities to boost margin, to boost revenues. They hire these consultants to do this. There's so many moving parts. But ultimately, everything in green lands in the PBM's bank account. An example of money that leaves the PBM's bank account is when it pays a pharmacy a reimbursement for a prescription it dispensed to a plan participant. That's money out of the PBM's bank account that when it's a traditional model, it hates to pay. It really doesn't want to pay. Another example of a cash disbursement would be a share of rebate dollars the PBM passes back to its clients. Whatever is left on is what we call the earnings after cash disbursements. You could call it the PBM's management fee. You could call it the PBM service fee. You could call it the PBM's administrative fee. At the end of the day, it's what the PBM is being paid to what? To PBM. The time is now where the buyer has more say so, more control, more transparency. That control comes with transparency. You're paying the bills. You're hiring what you believe to be a partner, not someone, some entity is going to take advantage of every loophole. It pisses me off to say that, to take advantage of a loophole in healthcare. So there's two options. The big PBMs refuse to act as fiduciaries. You now know why. Why? It means less money for them. It means less control and more transparency for you. If you like your PBM and you just want them to behave better, the only other option is radical transparency. I've got to know where the money is flowing. I've got to know what I'm paying you at the end of the day to be the PBM. I've got to know and trust and be able to verify that the decisions you make to manage our pharmacy benefit are in our best interest and not yours. This company is still a client today. They came to us at 57.88. In the first year, they're at 23 bucks. They're still today, what has it been, 4 years now? They're still today mid 30s. They're still paying today less than what they were paying 4 years ago with Prime, even though Prime gets better contracts from pharmacies and they get bigger rebates from the manufacturers than we do. Remember, I told you, it's not price is one driver, but as important are utilization, product mix, and the member cost share, i.e. copay accumulator programs, and are they employed? All of these things factor into the final cost to the plan at the end of the year. Prime was charging them $35 per member per month more than what we were. So if you believe Prime gets better pharmacy network contracts and bigger rebates than we do, then you also would have to believe that at a minimum, their management fee, what they were being paid to PBM, was $35 per member per month. The difference between 57 and 23. Because this is the bottom. Why is it almost 60? I just told you why. And so, two things. The courts may not allow this to continue to happen. And if they do, so what? There are better options. The second thing is, even if you have the money and you're sitting on a pile of cash and you allow this to happen, it means you allow inefficiencies in your business. It means you put your employees and their dependents at risk. You put them in harm's way. And by the way, um, again, you can just say I'm just talking, right? I just like to back up what I say. I don't want no parts of the bad rap we get. We're trying to turn this thing around. All right. So listen, you're here today, and I appreciate your time. And I'm wrapping up here. I just got one ask. You're here today because you've become aware that a problem exists, and you're thinking about overcoming it, and you're intending to take some sort of action, right? I'm going to ask that that action be the only program with the buyer's interest in mind at heart, that's backed by a major university and its school of pharmacy, to teach people how to sit at the table with a PBM and talk their language for the betterment of your organization and your workforce. Plenty of information out online. We got a class that starts in June virtual, and we're doing a hybrid in person, which starts in June as well, but we meet face to face. It's a kind of expedited classroom, that in person workshop. And then we meet face to face for 2.5 days. I like that because it has a higher pass rate, and we can talk about stuff and you get more CE. We can talk about stuff that you can't talk about, virtually. And so, just dropping names here really quickly. I went through college and didn't know the school. My business school was named. I knew the name, but I didn't know who he was. And so it wasn't until after college I decided I'm going to find out who this guy is. He's got an autobiography, The Art of Being Unreasonable. If you haven't read it, pick it up. But anyway, he's the only person in the history of the world, Elon Musk may get there someday, to be the founder of two Fortune 500 companies, KB Homes and Sun Life Financial. He did that. He believes the key starts with education. Who am I to argue? Okay, that's my time today. I'm going to stick around in case any questions come through. But remember, emotion is what's going to get this thing changed. And so we'll see you around. And here's my contact information. We'll talk soon.